Are we being recorded?
Yes, it says it's being
Yes.
recorded.
Oh, good. Okay. It's 7:02 PM, and I'm calling the October 22nd, 2024 Planning Board meeting to order. The meeting is being recorded by HW Cam. I'll begin by taking rolls, so when I call your name, would you please indicate that you're present? Pat Norton,
Present.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, present.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, present.
Darcy Dale,
Darcy Dale, present.
Matt Hamel,
Present.
Jeff Austin,
Jeff Austin, present.
and Marnie Crouch, present. I know for the record that Bill Wheaton is not present. He emailed me and told me he had a conflict and would not be able to attend, and I'm unaware of Beth's status, but we'll begin. We have a quorum. So the first item on our agenda is a discussion of a letter to be transmitted to the Select Board regarding the creation of an implementation committee for the master plan. And board members have had a copy of the letter. I transmitted a subsequent version of it that incorporated some of the comments that were made at our prior meeting. And I also, at Darcy's suggestion, she texted me and advised that she thought a representative of the Community Preservation Committee should be part of the implementation committee. And I went ahead and added that because unless anybody disagrees, I think that a representative from that committee is a wise choice, particularly because they are known for dispensing funds at some
That's right.
at some periods of time. So has everyone, so I made that one single change, and that's the only change to the document that you have now in front of you that's dated October 23rd. So does anyone else have any comments, substantive comments? I think the opportunity for minor edits has passed, although I'll be lenient if they're typos. But I'm really interested now in substantive changes that anyone has.
Marty, is this a letter that just gets transmitted and see if there's a response, or is it done in preparation for a select board hearing where?
No,
Might-
well, I'm glad you asked that question, because the master plan actually is not on the town's website, I'm contemplating, and I would appreciate the opinion of everyone here, whether we should agree to the form of the letter and then just hold it until such time as the master plan actually is 100% completed and posted on the webpage. Because right now, it's a bit of a vacuum, and I think that maybe some people in town are confused as to whether or not it has been adopted. We did adopt it, but it was subject to the clerical inclusion of the maps that I guess weren't electronic form that Emil didn't have access to when he did the Word document. So first off, does anyone have any changes to the letter itself? Any comments about its content? No?
No.
And so then the next question is there a consensus about waiting to transmit it until such time as the master plan actually is on the town's
Is there an
website?
estimate of when that might be?
I'm hoping that it's soon, because we approved the master plan on August 6th, and we're coming off on 3 months, and I don't believe that this task of inserting the maps is that difficult. Which isn't to say I could do it on my computer, I won't go that far, but I think that someone who has access to those files probably can do it relatively easily if they have a modicum skill set. So
It's a good segue to the replacement for me. Also, he will be picking or provided with an administrative assistant slash planner to work with him as well. So that's definitely not something that I have the benefit of now.
Right.
But he is starting on Monday, and we all look forward to that.
Well, not to ruin his Monday morning, but could you advise him that, that getting this master plan up on the website is definitely a high priority? I mean,
Definitely.
the master plan steering committee spent probably 2 years working on it, and the planning board worked on it, and the community provided us with input, and it is a good roadmap for what the town can contemplate in its future. And so I think we should go about implementing it. So what I would propose is that we vote to approve this letter, and I will hold it until such time as the master plan is actually on the town's webpage. I will adjust the date accordingly and send it off to the select board. Is that something that sounds like a plan?
My recommendation is to let it fly. I don't, because I don't know if one has to precede the other. It's information that they can have in hand for when it does get posted and finally approved. And then there could be some thought. Gives more time to get thought against who, you know, the individuals that might participate in the effort. And, you know, we're working on the initiative. It's not like the initiatives that the plan described are on
Aren't
hold
happy? Okay.
until
You
they
know,
get posted.
I said I'm open to,
The flip side of that is that often when a document comes through that's not timely with other activities, it gets shelved and forgotten.
Mhm.
So that's just another editorial look at it.
Mhm.
So,
so now.
Yeah, I think you're right in that it doesn't have the same weight as a law because it's really a guideline. I think the master plan, it's not a regulation, so. But I agree with Jonathan too, that because it's not ink, it's not complete, and we're really close to completion. I guesstimated there were 10 to 15 maximum apps that have to go in there that are already completed, as far as I know. They were in the original Barrett master plan, so I think that information exists, at least with them.
to say it more positively, there'd be more momentum if it was completed with all the maps and available to look at, and then you look at this document in juxtaposition to that.
Right, and I don't think
Yeah,
if
I'm okay with
it's the highest priority or one of the highest priorities for Mark Connors, then we're not looking at a gap in time of more than 2 weeks.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So I'll entertain a motion that we approve this letter, and we will date it at such time as the master plan appears on the town's
So moved.
webpage.
Second?
Great. Pat Norton,
Norton, aye?
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Darcy Dale,
Darcy Dale, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. Great.
Can I wander off the subject for just a moment and ask Patrick a question?
Sure.
Okay. I know you've addressed this before, Patrick, but can you remind us what your sort of overlap and onboarding is with the new planning director?
Mr. Connors is to have his first day on the 28th of October. My last day is the 15th of November. So there's a full 2-week period there that we'll be working together.
So you're gonna download all of your wisdom from your lifetime in 2 weeks.
Well, I've sent him probably 100 emails since he was selected. We've had one Zoom meeting. I had invited him tonight. However, he told me this afternoon that he was several time zones ahead of us, which tells me he's probably in Europe on sabbatical, but he was happy to be starting on Monday. So,
Well, it's wise for him to take some time now, because he's
Yeah.
not gonna have a lot for a while.
Well,
yeah,
well,
I told him to enjoy his time off because he'd look back on it pretty soon.
well, I wish you luck in that
Thank you.
compressed transition. So,
Well,
and
let's
I
see.
wish you luck with your next endeavor, so
Wait,
whatever
our
that is.
next meeting is November 12th, so you will be at our next.
I will be there, yeah. That'll be
Okay.
my last.
Okay. Ah, bittersweet, huh? I guess. Anyhow, have we ascertained whether Mr. Connors is familiar with form-based codes?
I have sent him quite a bit of the information that we have received from UTIL. And I've sent him some of those packages, as well as some of the comments that we've gotten regarding form-based code as well as 3A, just to try to keep him get him to the point where he's got some familiarity with where things are right now. As a matter of fact, I sent him your email and Caroline's email today. So he's aware of that.
Right. Well, that's a good, since we're talking segues, into our next item on the agenda, which is UTIL's public hearing approach. And I think maybe in the interest of just being efficient, maybe we want to take out Patrick's proposed meeting dates
I guess.
and see how they compare. So before we dive into the UTIL's proposed approach, could I just ask you, Patrick, there were two meeting dates that I questioned, and one was January 21st, because January 20th is a holiday, I believe. Is that Martin Luther King Day?
I think it is.
So, do we get bumped by the select board in that circumstance?
They have not set their schedule yet. So, they haven't called dibs on the 21st yet. But the fact is that, if we get this room reserved, and that's one of the reasons for the schedule, is that the quicker we get our ask in, the quicker it's committed to this board, and the less kvetching we have to get ourselves a meeting space, or having to do entirely Zoom remote meetings, so.
Right, and I think it's important, particularly for these dates, if we're communicating with UTIL on the form-based code and whatnot, that we meet in person, so that if there are maps or other documents, that they're easy to see, and we could even gather around a table to review them as opposed to trying to do them by Zoom. So with that said, we'll just go forward. So,
Marty, they only have two in-person meetings in early December and early January. They're suggesting the remainder of three are virtual.
yeah, but we will all be present, so
Okay.
regardless, I mean, whatever materials, we will be able to look at them.
Okay.
So, then our next meeting is November 12th. I think that's too early for this orientation and Q&A. I think that date would be November 26th. And then the early December date is, our meeting is December 3rd, but I would think really the early December should be our December 17th date. It seems,
Yeah.
so we'll do 11/26 and 12/17. That seems more realistic. Does anyone have any opinion on that? Does that work? And then, the early January date, I suppose, would be January 7th. The early February date, February 4th. And the late February, February 25th.
Ordinarily, we would meet on the 18th, which would be the third Tuesday in February.
Yeah.
However, that is a school vacation week, so that's, I've
Right,
taken that out of consideration and,
right. Because if you had left it in,
yeah,
our friend Mr. Norton would be,
that's right,
Vacation,
yeah.
flying in from Hawaii.
As would be many, participants, so.
oh, right. Pat, you have little kids too.
Yep.
So who else has little kids? Jeff, you have kids? Okay, so, good point. No, we don't want to annoy parents. So, with that, with those dates inserted, I think we can just proceed. I mean, I think that unless anybody has any comments about this, it is a way of going forward with our form-based code. And we'll see what kind of information UTL presents. Emil, did you want to give any further update on
Yeah, just a
on
little
that?
bit. I mean, Patrick, would you communicate with UT, Leonard, with these dates? Would you do that, or?
I definitely would,
Yeah.
yeah.
Will you do it, though, or?
Sure.
Yeah.
The remainder of the meetings for this year in '24, we have there's on the schedule, it has us in for the 26th, which is the Tuesday prior to Thanksgiving, and then the following Tuesday on December 3rd, after the Thanksgiving
yeah.
weekend. So I'm wondering how effective those two back-to-back meetings are gonna be,
Well,
given the short week.
yeah,
Or if there's any reason to change them. I don't have a conflict, otherwise I'm just questioning whether or not we need both of those. in
well,
short.
the mid to late December, we just used up the November 26th date. December 3rd, let's see how it goes on December 26th.
Yep.
And see what we're looking at. Our next meeting, everybody has their homework assignment for their approximately 13 pages. So I want to get those, they're non-substantive edits. They're really corrections of just typographical errors or just nonsense or stuff that was left in the bylaw that should have been removed with subsequent changes. The types of corrections that Rich Maloney made. And as I said at the last meeting, I saw some just really odd numbering issues in the table of use regulations. So I think that's a good activity for November 12th, and whatever else comes down the pike for us. But, let's hold steady on December 3rd until we have a little more information. Also on November 12th, we're going to have a whole batch of minutes to review, okay? And they're just a lot of minutes. I think they're going to be 11, at least 11, maybe more sets of minutes. Some of these are old, and hopefully we'll get even more, because I've gone through the minutes and agenda on the planning board's webpage and noted the dates where there are no minutes, or where there have been minutes, where they haven't been approved, or whatever. So I want to definitely make a push to get all the minutes for December, for 2024, 2023, and 2022 prepared, reviewed, and approved before the end of the year. And so November 12th will be a good day to do that kind of perfunctory task. Now, some of the minutes that I found, you know, going through my email and also looking on my computer, I did a cursory edit. Those minutes are by no means perfect. They could have typographical errors in there. Jonathan, you could be poor, really poor.
At the E?
I did my best. I ran them through the Word function to review for grammar and spelling, but it's not foolproof. So I alert you, you will not be able to read all these minutes when we're sitting at this table. You have to review them in advance. If you don't, there will be no time, you know, to try and sort through all the minutes that we have. That said, I want the most recent minutes to be in perfect shape. The ones that are really old, I think it's more critical that they get posted than they're perfect.
Right.
Because right now, we have an open meeting law violation. It's plain as day by not having those minutes posted timely. Minutes are supposed to be posted timely. Patrick, would you give Mr. Connors the heads up on minutes? Because I'm going to go from being relatively nice to being a shrew about minutes if we don't get this, you know, under control. And we've done much better in 2024 than we have in prior years. 2022 is not commendable, let's just say that. So if we have these groups of minutes, please skim through them for glaring errors, and then we'll just try and get them approved and on our webpage. So, excuse me, I got off on a tangent. I don't know
Yeah.
how that happened.
Yeah, thank you, Marnie. I'll just give kind of a brief synopsis of where we are in the process according to UTIL's design plan, which they had submitted a task-by-task list when they submitted an RFQ, and were accepted as the planners. We had just, according to their plan, we had just completed task 2, which they referred to as public engagement process. Now that includes the stakeholder meetings, the public engagement, you know, the visioning survey and so forth. It was all of that stuff, and right up to the code development workshop, which was what they titled the last presentation on the 30th of September. And there were some things about that that I wanted to be sure that I understood completely, because they, where we are and where they're going to pick up now, or this is task 3 as we transition from the advisory committee. The advisory committee will meet one more time with UTIL on November 4th. And then Jonathan's having the workshops. We have one coming up tomorrow, and then there may be one other after that to kind of wrap up the workshop effort for feedback to UTIL. But what UTIL has done in shaping this is to, their first task in the draft recommendations for the form-based code, they're looking at the form-based code and what I would refer to the visioning in terms of where's the new development in town, where's the redevelopment, what is the vision for the future of the town. And to date, that they've been pretty much examining on a parcel basis existing properties to kind of define character and coming up with the metrics that they would be using perhaps in the code for frontages, setbacks, and so forth. They're trying to come up with an organizing strategy. But I think what they see in their design plan is to work the code simultaneously with the vision plan about new development, assessing what the infrastructure is to support development and determine what those limitations are and so forth. So they see the two going hand in hand, that you create that and then you test it. Can we code that? And I think that's how they're gonna proceed. So it's been frustrating in some senses, but also I can see the logic to doing it that way, and they are the consultants. But I just wanted to go over briefly what they saw now as the scenario going forward. So I made a kind of a brief synopsis of going forward here. The first part is gonna be zoning scenario exploration. And I just paraphrased what they intend to do, and I have the actual language if you want me to read it. But their goals are gonna be fleshing out a single approach, beginning now, fleshing out a single approach, find the right balance through a collaborative scenario planning exercise centered on realistic solutions. So they're starting now to look at what the surveys are telling them and what the workshop has been telling them, and they're processing that through their own lens. And number two, they're going to generate design and development scenarios to test potential paths to MBTA communities compliance, which is their task, including testing viability of different mixed uses and building typologies. And then also scenario exploration that will guide the conversation about the vision for the town center, including areas of friction or alignment with MBTA communities compliance, and enable creative problem solving to develop valid alternative paths that meet town needs and align with the vision developed for the town center. And specifically on their deliverables, what they had committed to, which we should be seeing, if not the next meeting, and certainly the first meeting in January. But the deliverables will be, they're gonna select 3 sites in the town center that representing typical conditions within the areas. So they've analyzed it through sub-areas. They've identified sub-areas with specific characteristics, and they're thinking of treating those in a specific way. So they're gonna select the 3 sites representing the typical conditions to test zoning parameters for mixed use and residential infill scenarios. In other words, this is where they start their visioning in terms of new development, redevelopment, and so forth. What are the limitations, where's it gonna happen, and really what does it look like? They're gonna do 4 development design scenarios for each of 3 representative selected sites within the town center. 1 scenario will explore as-of-right development under base conditions, and 3 other alternate scenarios will explore various density and use mixes, scales of public realm, and infrastructure improvement. Each scenario will include plan drawings illustrating building massing, public realm connections, parking, surfacing roads, open spaces, and existing structures. Land use, program diagram in plan view, and 3-dimensional model in Rhino, including building massing, land use, and open space locations. Next bullet, progress materials for stakeholder presentations. And lastly, for each site, 2 3-dimensional illustrations for 1 selected scenario, including 1 bird's eye view and 1 eye-level view. So they've indicated and committed to really giving us the visuals we've been waiting for on this. And this includes not only the form-based code development, redevelopment, but also presumably the 3A component, at least as it's written now. And then lastly, what I just want to go over is the other thing that concerned me, because of the time frame, we're down to 5 meetings. I wanted to know, again, just review what the components of the form-based code are. And they've, again, committed to 9 things within the code. They're going to do an overview, which is definitions, principles, and intent, explanations of the regulations. So this is how you introduce the code to people who are reading it. Number 2, the critical thing, regulating plan, a map of the new form-based code districts illustrating the location of buildings, streets, blocks, public spaces such as greens, parks, and other special features, aspect of build-to lines and required building lines, and building type or form designations. The regulating plan, all zoning maps have to have all zoning plans have to have a map. So the regulating plan is that map which determines what the organizing feature is. And they're kind of tilting toward frontages and streets as the organizing feature for writing the code. That's an important step that we really have to watch. Number 3, site lot standards. These standards control the placement of buildings within parcels, parking locations, setbacks, lot coverage, separation between buildings, and green space ratios. Number 4, building form standards. Standards to control building form may consist of building types, building height, transparency, which is the amount of glass in a building, landscaping, stormwater, and sign control. 5, public realm standards, design attributes for the public realm and safe streets, and include standards for sidewalks, parking and travel lanes, curb geometry, street trees, lighting, low-impact stormwater management or its techniques. 6, parking location and parking management standards. Those are flexible standards that provide for mixed uses and a smaller footprint through shared parking. 7, other standards as needed. We're not going to do an architectural standard, so that's not part of it. 8, development approval process and administrative mechanisms. That's how you go through the permitting process. And finally, of course, glossary terms, definitions. That is their breakdown for their form-based code. That's a lot of charts. It's a lot of information to produce in a relatively short time. So those are things that we're going to be watching very closely and trying to get as clear an answer as we can. There's been a little bit of mystery, I'll admit that, around the whole 3A business because of well, for various reasons. UTIL is still, I think, searching how best to approach that. And some of the questions that have come up, I think, were legitimate, around the overlapping of the form-based code and the 3A, Section 3A requirements or compliance. But I can understand the logic, I think, of what they're doing on that. And I must say, I was getting a little bit impatient here. When are we going to really see the product here? And because we're coming up to writing a code, and we have to get to the vision as soon as we can, so that you can clearly go in a straight line to get to the writing the code that's going to really codify the vision. So it's not anything you can play with for a while. That's why at the outset, I know this is a 6 to 8 month process. This has been condensed into a pretty short time. But they committed to it, and so I think the process going forward is going to be interesting. They have actually through these workshops that Jonathan has been organizing and guiding, they're fine if we want to continue that that process through using that advisory group composition going forward. We have some very good people on it, I think, and that we can continue meeting these on an interim basis to kind of look at information sort of between the main meetings. But going forward, it's going to be really a lot of work in a short period of time that we have to get through on this. So in the end, we have all these charts and.
Yeah, the project, the challenge with that scenario is that you don't have the right people with the ability to get exposure to the information that, they're going to go too far probably. They're going to do a bunch of things without having input from the right people and maybe get too far down a road in the wrong direction prior to being able to get them back to where we wanted them to be at. I think that was the concern early on. I know that the right people weren't getting involved in the right periods of time to help guide what the outcome was that we were hoping to get. And I wonder, if we invest a lot of money on a timeline, the timeline's important, but it's not as important as getting the right thing with the amount of investment that we're making. So
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know
I mean, it's not my intention to just accept anything that comes down, from my standpoint.
Exactly, and that, obviously, the planning board is
Yeah.
very invested in getting the right result. I mean, we've been talking about a form-based code for a really long time, and when we do it, we should get it right. It's a real opportunity for the town, and there's no sense accepting something that doesn't really reflect good planning and also the consensus of the community. So the question, though, that I have is how what you just read fits within their public hearing approach. So what, I hate this word, but deliverables are going to be before us on these dates.
That was the reason I went through their
Which-
RFQ, to
Yes.
say, okay, we need to have certain things, they have to happen if you're gonna write the code.
Right.
Where
and
does that fit in there?
Where does
And-
that fit in? And I'm thinking it's a virtual meeting on February 4th.
And,
I mean,
I've got a letter to them, right now that is looking for that information, because we
Yeah.
need to prepare in advance for each one of these meetings.
oh, absolutely.
And I just want to say, I know that there's a lot of opposition on the board now, and what is really important for us, I think, working on it, is that this board at least can be much closer to unanimity than we are now. So we're going to have to go through some work, and I don't know how we can do that as a board that has to meet in public, not that we're trying to steer anything through, but in terms of getting a public space and broadcasting it and, going on camera,
So,
to get, to produce the information we need so everybody gets the right information. And there's a lot of misleading, I think, information out there. So, Jonathan?
yeah, I'd just like to pose a few ideas and questions. I agree, there's a lot to do in a short amount of time. I agree there's a lot to talk about, and I agree the right information needs to be out there so we can evaluate and others can evaluate in a realistic time frame, not in the last meeting. We only have five, I'm just going to focus on the planning board for a second. So we have 5 interchanges with them. And what we might want to do as a planning board is see if we can come up with some kind of a framework through which we evaluate the information. And if that framework even says, well, we need the following work product and it's not produced, we can very quickly have consensus that they need to produce that work product for us to evaluate it. So it'd be what do we need to be able to make an intelligent decision? Are we getting that in a timely manner? And what are the steps that the planning board ought to do to make a methodical evaluation and recommendation on it? So I think it's worth, in advance of receiving the information and in advance of these 5 meetings, to talk about a framework. So that's just, the first question is, does the planning board have the appetite to try to organize a framework that we, what are the lenses that we're going to put this through? And Emil just gave some examples. So for example, there's looking at things lot by lot, and we've seen a lot of that. We've seen quite a bit of that. There's also looking at things globally. What's the relationship of all the strategies they're putting together and what they're including, what they're not including? That's another lens to put it through. And then another completely different lens is what's the relationship to an ideal form-based code to what 3A is saying? That's another lens. I'm just giving examples of the kind of framework that we can set up
Right.
and require the enough information to make an intelligent response and recommendation.
Okay, and I think that's an excellent idea, and I think that, in my view, the first step is to try and understand what they're going to be presenting us with on these specific dates. And then, to your point, try and then develop that framework. So if we know at least roughly what we're going to get, or do you see it more globally?
Let me,
Because I
let-
understand what you're talking
yes.
about, but
yes, and
we're getting stuff piecemeal.
yes. And what I think might be a good way to do it, but this is all open for discussion, is to on one hand ask UTIL, what do you think you'll be giving us, specifically work product-wise,
Right.
in each of these 5 meetings? So that's one strategy. The other strategy is to be proactive and run ahead of the process
Okay.
and ask ourselves, what do we need? And Patrick, you have strong, opinions about that. You've voiced that. Other people have voiced strong opinions about what they need in order to evaluate this correctly. I think we can run ahead of that process and ask ourselves, what do we need? And then we can convey that to UTIL and guide them. And that's kind of how the advisory committee has been
Right.
being. We react to what they give us, but we also run ahead and say, look, the town needs to know this, or the town prioritizes that. Here it is. Here's our response to what you're doing, and here's our response to what you haven't done. So it's sort of two-prong. It's give and take. So what that means is the planning board really needs to be proactive and create a framework and then share the framework. Here's ideally what we need. Whether they produce that or not is another story, but I think it's worth the planning board talking about what do we need.
I think the one real valuable input in the process right now would be the outcome and the raw data that they received as a result of the workshops and the surveys. Because I honestly had a hard time cheerleading the neighborhood to participate in the survey because of the reaction that was following the school project, where the survey results were one thing, but the school committee went ahead and did another thing. They're like, why are we doing these surveys? The project team just does what they want and doesn't make any difference what we write. So why go to the workshop, provide input, when you don't get information back about the raw data as a result, not necessarily the interpretation of that data in a design document or in a concept. So I think one very important and useful bit of information is the raw data back from workshops and surveys without analysis. That helps paint the picture of what the town would really like to get out of the process. Like you mentioned, the town. I think it's good to know what the participants in those efforts were.
Well, UTIL has been thorough about absorbing and publishing the survey results. So, and in fact, as a personal editorial comment, I would say that they've been maybe too responsive to it. In other words, if all you do is use that as a vote, and if less than 50% of people say, they want to explore something, they've been dropping it. So,
That information is there, or?
oh yeah, it's all
where?
there. Yeah, it's all there. It's in the decks.
Go to their
Yep.
website.
Yeah, I was just there before the meeting.
Yeah, the September 30th slide deck
Yeah.
has some of the survey results in there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of survey information.
And what's great is they not only did the percentage of each response, but if there was something with a write-in comment, they often added the write-in comments. You could see who wanted to go outside the lines of the question. So,
On the notification system for their project site, but there hasn't been a notification prior since announcing the September 30th meeting.
yeah, so I don't know what their public outreach process is. I haven't been tracking that,
No.
but,
It's hard to know that information is there, too.
yeah. But the information does exist, and if for some reason it's hard to find, then maybe that's the first thing we do is we lobby them to make it more accessible. One thing that we've said to them is create a better link to get to your website. Sometimes people even have trouble getting to their website. So we've talked about creating multiple links to get to their website.
The other thing is the surveys don't seem to be conclusive. Everything seems to be, to me anyway, in the mid-range, 50%. So it might vary between 45 and 55. Those are not really convincing surveys, and they really depends on the words you use when you ask the question. So how much weight should you give that? But I think we're hoping for more feedback during these public engagement sessions. I think they're taking a lot of the work from the workshop, and I will say regarding what Jonathan was suggesting, pushing them, that's exactly what we were doing with the advisory committee, not trying to take it over, but ask the right questions to a group of people who are pretty good representatives of the community, from my standpoint anyway, and knowledgeable people. And we were kind of pushing the project as we thought it ought to go, not for a specific conclusion, but we're looking for public opinions out of this, not expressing our own feelings about it. But and we found that through these workshops, in that collaboration that took place, that was really productive. way to do it. So the format really made a difference between a slideshow presentation and an actual workshop where it's hands-on and you're talking around a table, exchanging ideas. So that really worked. And that's sort of what I meant. We could do the similar thing by kind of setting up questions about things that are concerns of the planning board going forward and trying to get responses from you, Teal, on those. We could do it that way, dedicating some time. But I think it's going to be a meeting outside of, whether it's a special meeting, and I don't know, I mean, this room might not be available too often, but I'm not sure how best to do that at this stage.
I mean, I like the idea of a special meeting. I also like the idea of a workshop format. I mean, the folks who remember the Gordon Conwell workshops, I'm hoping felt that they were more productive than looking at a slide deck or, talking from behind your microphone, but actually gathering around a table and looking at maps and exchanging ideas and scribbling on Post-its and whatnot, I think generated a lot of interesting ideas in the Gordon Conwell process. That's worked very well in the workshops. And I would propose that for setting up a framework, again, it might be nice to have a special meeting and have a little bit more hands-on informal discussion of what each person thinks they need to evaluate this. What are your minimum requirements of information, graphics, what things are deal breakers, what things are of interest that you haven't seen yet. So, and the other thing that could be useful if it's, and this is up to probably the selection committee and town manager, whether what Emil just read out is an excerpt from the RFQ, could we use that as basically a little bit of an agenda to work off of? I mean, that should be the work product that we're getting. If we all had the benefit of having that in our hands, it could guide our questions, of the supposed work product that's coming our way, because that's what we'll be evaluating in our 5 meetings, as the planning board reviewing this project.
Emil, I think it would be very important if you could share that, what you just read, with the planning board.
Oh,
As a
sure.
document.
Yeah.
But it is an excerpt from the RFQ, so the question is that okay? In other words, that hasn't been published, the RFQ hasn't been published, so you'd be publishing a...
It's a public document, though.
What's that?
It's a public document.
Okay, great, then there's the answer, so maybe,
Can do that, yeah.
So we need to take that document and be able to translate it into something concrete.
yes,
That we sit around the table and
Yeah.
evaluate.
yes.
And so I like your idea of the framework. I'm just struggling in my mind as to what it is.
Well, we don't have to think of what the framework is in it right now, but what you could do, what I could see, and I think that because Emil and I have been involved in the advisory committee process and are a little closer to what the steps are, I think we could kind of facilitate those things. And as soon as, what's really great in the workshops is as soon as you start creating a little bit of framework so people can have some footing to understand how they fit into the process, the questions start getting really interesting, and the comments and suggestions get really interesting and really germane, really quick.
Right. And I also think that we have to have a floor of understanding about
Yeah.
the form-based code, how it relates to the existing code, what the benefits are for the form-based code versus the existing code that's in
Sure.
effect for the commercial district and the Willow Street overlay district. So that people can be disabused of the notion that there's any ability whatsoever of these codes to disrupt private property. I mean, that's...
Well, what I would say is, instead of diving into the specifics of the agenda, what I think you could do is one of the steps, instead of like doing a slideshow, listening to another slideshow of what it is and what it isn't,
Yeah.
what I think would be really useful is, and this is just an idea, and people can tell me, that this is interesting or not interesting. I think it's really interesting just to go around the table and get a feel for kind of what the highest hopes and the worst fears about each subject are. Just say it out loud, and then what we can do is dig into, okay, yes, piece of what you said has a lot of basis, and that's a good thing to be concerned about. And then another piece of that has some more data over here. Here's the data that is part of that. But to literally go around, instead of sitting passively and looking at a slideshow, instead go around and have a roundtable discussion about your concerns, your hopes, and that gets to the heart of it really quickly.
I was just trying to
yeah.
just contrast the existing
Sure,
zoning with the benefits
sure.
of
And that might be,
form-based code, just maybe a little handout, so
Well, that's-
people have
yeah,
that.
we could have an FAQ or something like that.
The
But-
FAQ would be a,
Yeah, FAQs, but keep that stuff condensed and really focus on discussion,
Right.
roundtable discussion. How does, I guess my question is, that's an idea, do people resonate with that idea?
Well, I think it is important that people articulate, and especially people on the planning board, because we're actually going to be the arbiters of what goes to town meeting. What is it that people are afraid of, and what do they want to see for the downtown? That is really, what,
So people are afraid, from the server, now it was way down at the site. You gotta get to it at the bottom of their page, but just brief analysis of what they're providing for information on the survey, nobody wants to change. Like, less than half the people surveyed wanted anything to change, right? 8% of the people surveyed thought that the downtown residential area should be enhanced or changed.
Yeah.
That's the.
So that's a
against the-
perfect
that's like
perfect
how do you-
starting
how
point
does
for a
the
discussion.
zoning code
Perfect,
address
perfect.
an improvement when
Yes.
people don't want change.
Perfect. That's a great, in fact, that should be agenda item 1
Yeah.
for the workshop. Not right this second, but for the workshop.
Because if you're proposing change, and that's,
It's a
The thing,
beautiful,
then
it's an
people wanna kill it.
elegant place to start. I love that.
I do too.
So,
I wish I could stop aging.
so, so anyway,
It just happens.
so the question would be, do we have the appetite to have that kind of roundtable discussion and out of it build a framework? And the framework might be a combination of where do board members agree and where do they disagree on the approach to this? That would be useful. And then as we get documents in front of us, from UTIL, given that, there's a certain lens, we're looking at it through here, or a different lens over there, and that not everybody's in alignment, what would be the most productive way to evaluate, based on where we align and where we don't align. And I think that what my highest hope is, if we did that in advance, proactively, we might be able to give some of that feedback back to UTIL and actually enrich or reinform their priorities. That would be my hope. And basically, we could accelerate the review process and accelerate the exchange of information. That would be my highest hope. Whether that works or not, I don't know. But basically, there's a lot to discuss even without having any documents in front of us. And you hit the perfect first discussion. Perfect. And that was one of the items that we spent probably 45 minutes on, probably even in 2 workshops. It was a very, very rich discussion.
Was that, people were voicing their reluctance to see?
Why do we need to do this? Why change? We don't want change. We don't want anything. Just leave it alone. That was the question. And it was a great question. It was a really great question. I don't want to dig into it now.
okay.
I
was
don't
gonna
want to
say-
dig into it now.
All right.
I just want to set it up as an agenda.
Well, what it indicated-
This is the thing, is we
what it
don't have
indicated-
much time for our discussions.
What it
Oh, we can
indicated-
start tonight if you want.
It was
Well,
a
we
signal
could
that
have a little bit of a discussion
there's a
tonight.
misunderstanding of what this code is, because they're mixing it with something they shouldn't be, and that enabled us to kind of get into.
And that's another great
Good
question,
discussion.
is what's the intersection of
Right.
an ideal form-based code for the downtown without 3A and a form-based code that does have 3A in it? What's the intersection of those two things? We haven't gotten there yet, but it's a really important discussion. What would 3A look like if we'd done this 3 years ago? What would it look like? And what does it look like with 3A overlaid into it? And can you point to where the differences are? we should be able to do that. And in fact, I think my editorial opinion is we should demand of UTIL that they give us enough information to have that discussion. And if they don't, then we need to find a way to get to that discussion. Otherwise, really, everything is so muddied that it's hard to take a vote on it. Simple as that.
I mean, it would be hard for the planning board to take a vote on it.
Yes.
Let alone the town.
Yes, yes, yes. So there's wonderful, wonderful discussion to be had, and a lot of it could go right back to UTIL as feedback
Right.
before they even present anything.
So if we want to have a little bit of a discussion, I mean, people in town say they want the town to remain the same. But if you look just at the kind of the quote-unquote industrial areas of Willow Street, I think one of those fellows who has the body shop there, he's got to be in his 80s. I mean, some of those businesses aren't going to be there forever. I think some of the people who own those lots along Willow Street there are, maybe looking to, I hate to use the word, cash out. I don't know that for a fact, but, those businesses are not, when you think about improving the downtown, I think that's an area where there, in fact, was some consensus where people would like to see change there. I remember looking at that in the survey. So that, I think when people say they don't want to see the downtown changed, I think they don't want to see it lose the kind of gestalt that it has right now. But I mean, obviously, you could envision, say, where the post office is, making a little parklet in front of the post office to make that whole open area more welcoming, because the post office has a setback that's not consistent with the rest of the street. So if you were to show someone, well, maybe that could be a change, a little bit of a change there, they would say, well, that's okay. You
I
know,
think
that doesn't,
people quotations is a rough, I think people, when you think about people with kids in schools, they don't care. They really do not care. We want parks and good schools. We want good parks, good schools, good fields, good schools. That's it. That's what anybody cares about. And nobody cares what downtown has or doesn't have.
So
And I think that's with the people quotation marks. I think that is like perspectives in what we're referring to, and people in town, people in whatever, people that I'm referring to are at soccer practice and can't go to the things or something like that. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
you can't surmise what people, I guess, want or don't want. But
you're
that,
speaking for a cohort of people who quote unquote.
I'm not really speaking for the people. I'm just saying that, like,
as a parent, I would agree.
when you're looking at MCAS
That
results,
helps.
your kid's school is like below mean, in the country, and and it's like, oh my God, what's
Yeah.
happening with math? And nobody cares where the post office is.
So Jonathan, I like that idea, having
Okay.
an open discussion and talking about it and
Yep.
teasing out the facts and just exploring those. I like that. My question would be, this far into the process, is it reasonable to think that we would have enough influence to possibly change the trajectory of where they're going today? And if the answer is yes, does the advisory board really have that? Or is the advisory board just a speaker box for them to listen to? Because
Well, I'm talking more about the planning board. The discussion, the roundtable discussion
Yeah,
is
no, I
about
understand.
teeing up for the planning board to respond to what's put in front of them.
No, I understand, but then what do we do with that information? Let's say we all come to a consensus of what we think it should be and what we were looking for expectations. What happens to that information? And does it really have any teeth to make any influence?
Well, if the planning board doesn't endorse what's coming before us, that's, it would say in the warrant, it would say the planning board does not endorse this.
A report and recommendation as to this form-based code.
Before it goes to the town vote?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
It would go to
It
the
would-
town vote, but I mean,
It'd still
we
go,
would
yeah.
be, we
But
wouldn't be
it would-
endorsing it.
Yeah, you'd read the warrant and it would say the planning board, doesn't endorse this because of this, this, and this. That could be the outcome. Or the outcome could be you redirect the priorities.
I guess I asked because I get the sense that people and townspeople and maybe even people that are on the advisory board feel like they're part of the process, but they're really not making influence. And a good example is last night at the select board meeting, I mean, the HDC was here, asking that they separate 3A from it, because they feel it's dead in the water as long as 3A is attached to it.
That was HDC's
I'm sorry,
position?
yes, they had a joint meeting last night, and HDC,
Rick Mitchell.
Rick Mitchell flat out said, that's their strong recommendation to Joe, is to pull the 3A piece out completely.
And maybe that's the answer. We're not quite there yet, because
Yeah.
we haven't seen what either of those looks like, is the challenge. We've seen lot by,
Votes at town meeting.
Yes.
That has been determined.
No, I understand, but I think the feeling is, I mean, if we went to the last util meeting, there's still a little
Yeah.
tension around anything, it's because it's attached to 3A.
Because you can't really separate the two. Just the presence of two is gonna cause confusion.
Yeah, Yeah.
I would be satisfied if, because I think asking us to really come up to speed in just a couple of meetings is kind of unrealistic. But I would think if we all if we all listen to information that is true and come to an agreement that, yes, this is what this is about, you know, what can it do, what is it not gonna do in terms of being, if we can all at least understand that and do our own evaluation if it does go to a vote, and for a form-based code. In the end, you're gonna have to vote on it based on your own intellectual analysis of whether you think it's appropriate thing to do or not. But I think trying to guide you, Teal, I would use their task list mostly for us as a checklist. We're at this point, we should have this information, we don't have it yet, when are we gonna get it? So it's more of a checklist than guide how we're gonna steer them in any particular direction, because I think it's too late for that. And, you know, I think that can't happen. If we can all come up with and have really a better sense of what it can do and what it can't do. I've heard so many misstatements about what it is and what it isn't, and that it's hard to understand, or it's not hard to understand why there's such confusion out there. But
for the
I
roundtable,
think to get to that point would be a success for us. You know, and then because we drafted the RFQ on that and put it out for review, and these folks are following it pretty closely in their text. They by far were much more detailed than anybody else. And it's a first-rate design firm, and I think they know what the right thing to do is here, but at this stage, they seem quite reticent about taking, going beyond what they're kind of interpreting people will accept, you know, which is not a great way to do a visioning process, frankly. But I think as this critical part now is coming right into play, we should be getting information that really is the information we need to come to a decision about whether it's the right thing to do, and having discussions about it as we get the information would be really helpful. We need to communicate more with them. I don't know how that's going to happen, but to be sure we get the information in a timely fashion so we have time to research it, you know, in advance of a meeting, go in and just break it apart completely. And I think that would be helpful going through those stages.
So would it be helpful for like everyone to email kind of to somebody a list of some information that would be maybe nice to have available while we do that? Is it being proposed that util are in the room when we do that? Probably not, right? Because we haven't paid them.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, Patrick, whether you think any kind of communication through email, I think it can't be a back and forth. It can't be a communication.
No, just like a dump.
it'd be
like, here's some-
better for the planning board to have their roundtable discussion and then find where the alignment is, and then through consensus, just like a recommendation letter was just made for the implementation process, the same thing could be done from the planning board.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not a dialogue. It's more, we have our dialogue.
Yeah, okay.
We find alignment, find where there isn't alignment, and then convey that.
But
So-
I think if you do have ideas, that's something I'd like to see here, and so we could see where the bulk of them might lie, or which ones do we need to address first, what's the important of it, and then we can come together with some kind of response
Yeah, and I guess.
in a meeting,
I'm
you know,
gonna
to.
just throw this out, I know it's a can of worms, but I mean, is the problem 3A? I
But
mean,
let me just address that for a second.
Yeah.
Okay. So
But I
for
mean,
for
that's what-
for one of these processes to work, it has to sort of be facilitated so that you proceed with building blocks, right? If you try to start with the end solution or result or the answer to this multiple variable equation, you never get there. Never get there. Okay? So you got to put that aside. There's a multiple variable equation that has to be solved. We may never solve it, but can we find some building blocks that we can all stand on? And then you start working forward. So if we start with how does 3A relate to, you know, the downtown and go right to the top of the heap and try to solve it, we're never going to get there. Instead, I recommend you go back to your first statement. Why do we need to have a form-based code? Nobody wants change. You just stick to that subject, see if you can find some building blocks. Then when you've got that, go to the next subject. Then you find the building blocks that you can all stand on. Then, when you've got those building blocks, you can go to the top of the pyramid and then
Right.
find the intersection of form-based code and 3A.
I said.
Not until you build those building
I
blocks.
understand that, but I said that just because I think that's the fear.
Well, there's lots of fears. There's lots of fears. Lots of
But it's
fears.
one of the things
And they're
that-
all worth leaning deeply into. Deeply. What is your worst
Get a
fear?
list of those building blocks, you know, in order to convey to you Teal, here's the good, bad, and ugly of where we're at and what we need that we think will help make this educational and useful to allow people to understand and to better,
Sure.
you know, provide
Yeah.
you Teal with, you know,
Yeah.
where we're at, where we need to go.
And that
I'm
would be,
happy to do that.
and
but
that
I
would be a great
don't
outcome of
wanna
this process.
flail around
No.
with
Yeah.
a lot of verbiage.
Yes, exactly.
They want input, I know that, and let them sort it out in terms of, well, what's really the genesis of this?
And they've taken input. They've taken input from the surveys, they've taken input from the town workshops, and they've taken input from the advisory committee. We've seen they've changed stuff as a result of that. And we could have another bit of ingredients for that kind of change and clarity. And if we can do it successfully, then that will facilitate, I think, greater clarity when we talk to the select board. It'll facilitate greater clarity in communication to the town. It'll create greater clarity in what goes in the town warrant. It'll create greater clarity in the vote. And I'm not invested in what the outcome of that vote is, but I'm invested in building blocks that you're standing on solidly so you can have a dialogue. And right now, the dialogue is a very low grade. And I'm invested in a higher grade dialogue. That's what I'm invested in. So,
Yeah, it'd be for me, it would be beneficial if we had that conversation in the roundtable to start with the definition of the goals that were presented.
yes. And
Like, presented at the first workshop, and there was a lot of HDC verbiage in it, and I don't know if we ever aligned on what the goals of the effort were, and then it would be good to now, like, all right, if we align on goals internally, then where is this process heading towards achieving what we hope or what we set out to
Yep.
do?
That's my one concern with the approach of the building blocks. In my career, I find that you set goals and you try to find a path through those goals and reverse engineering is what I consider that to be. Sometimes, a lot of times when you ignore the goals and say, we'll figure it out when we get there, when these building blocks, you trip over yourself constantly.
oh no, we'll be looking at the building blocks. So, I guess what could be useful as a guide is the advisory committee created a set of guidelines and principles. And we might even start with looking at that and see if as a planning board, we agree or disagree with those guidelines and principles. It was the same process that we went through on Gordon Conwell. And we went very quickly through it on the planning board. And we got to consensus very quickly. And that, yes, I agree with you. When you do a project, you have to have a goal. Otherwise, you're flailing around. And the guidelines and principles create that. And what's great is you can actually have them on the table in front of you. And every time you feel like you're in the weeds, You can pull yourself up out of that ditch and look at those guidelines and principles and say, okay, with the debate we're having, how does that fit into guideline 5 and guideline 7?
Could I?
Yeah, these are things that really would guide your decision-making,
Could I
these
ask
principles.
you,
Yeah.
in the September 30th slide presentation, they had guiding principles and core values?
They did a summary of ours, which is
They
not-
reduced it
But if you look on, I think it's
significantly.
page 39 or 40, I think they have the set of core values that we came up in the advisory committee. You know,
I don't know if I have that. So, but this was, in some respects,
it was a graphic that said, and they asked, did this capture really, but
what you.
they squeezed things down into 1 or 2 words.
Which didn't capture it.
Doesn't really
Oh.
capture.
Doesn't
Does
capture it.
not.
The
That
answer
was
is
my
no,
question.
doesn't capture it.
So
The
that,
original document captures it.
so they repeated it, they did the full thing at the end, and how they broke it down into their individual, they summarized it in a,
Was that on the
More.
September 30th?
So-
yeah, it was. it
So the
was-
first step in
39
a
or 40.
process, and again, we're jumping into the middle of this, the first step would be to see if we can, if we're aligned with the guiding principles and core values, and if we aren't, modify them, and then those could be the planning board's core, because this is the advisory committee, their consensus. We could see if we could build our own consensus off of that. Then there's your goal that you set on the table in front of you. Then you can start with a really basic building block, and I love the building block. Why do we need to do this? I don't want change. That is a brilliant place to start, just brilliant. And I'm not being facetious. I'm being truly honest and earnest about this, because the discussion around that is really rich.
I think another rich part of the discussion is the perception that there's a housing shortage.
Bingo, yeah,
That's
there's
what I
another
wanted
great
to
one.
ask, like, do
Yeah.
we agree that there's a housing shortage?
Yep.
And what does that mean?
Yep.
Is another one
Yep.
that's on the table that people seem to be triggered by.
Or is it a housing shortage, or is it a choice in housing types?
Right.
Is it number of houses, or is it the choice? And this is the kind of nuance you can get into. And then you can figure out, okay, we don't agree there's a housing shortage, but we agree that the following things are missing, that kind of thing. And I'm not trying to predict what we get, where we land, but these are the conversations that can be had. Then, when you have a combination of those building blocks plus the guiding principles, my opinion is you could fly through the form-based code and the 3A metrics and see how it fits, and with very little wheel spinning, because you're clear on where you agree and disagree, and you're clear on what the priorities are through the principles and values. So,
Do you have your guiding principles from the
I don't.
workshop?
I did a selective, let's see if I have it. I did a selective print on it because it's a long one. I have them here. This is what they produced in their paper. This is what we came up with.
oh, there it is, okay. Do you want to
Yeah,
pass it around? Do you want to read it? Do you want to,
Yeah, maybe
can we
talk
make
about it,
can we make a
because
copy of it?
I would like a copy.
Can we make is there a place to make a copy in this room, in this space?
I'll check.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I can read it, unless you want.
Yeah, why don't you see if you can make a copy?
Yeah, I think if we had the information for the,
Yeah. It'd be easier.
Again, that was,
we're proposing to have, we don't need to read it now or do.
Yeah,
so, but if you wanted to have that, some conversation tonight, that'd be a great starting point.
Yeah.
Because, I agree with both of you, you both, both of you talked about, you need a goal when you're talking about, you can't just have building blocks. Absolutely.
Could I just ask you, I'm playing Mickey the Dunce, but maybe I am Mickey the Dunce. What is what are your building blocks, just as an example?
Common ground.
What?
Oh, yeah, common ground.
Common ground.
Like if we all, if half of us agreed that we, like Hamilton, just the way it is, don't touch the code, don't avoid 3A at all costs, just leave it alone. If the entire planning board agreed to that, then we know that. Or if there's more behind that, and there's within those statements are things that we can agree on that we haven't gotten to yet.
Pardon me, but I was thinking building blocks in terms of the actual standards that were set
No,
forth
no,
in the
No,
form-based
we're not
code.
there, not there.
No.
No,
I
that
was
we're,
thinking
we
more
have to begin,
potentially.
we have to begin at the beginning. No,
I
begin
was
at the
being
beginning.
very literal.
I
Begin
wouldn't
at the
get into the
beginning.
code at all, you know,
Yeah.
at this
Oh,
stage.
No.
The code is
Okay.
just codifies, you know, what you're trying to achieve.
Okay,
and-
so it was your terminology that confused me.
Yeah.
Yes, no, not code building blocks, just conversation building blocks.
Common
okay.
ground building.
Common ground building blocks,
Okay,
yes.
I got it now.
I mean, part of the, one of the,
Sorry.
like when you hear town manager speak about the effort too, it's kind of like, well,
So no,
let them
no go
draw
on the
the
copy.
thing, and that allows you to react, you know, where everyone's reacting to perception of what it might look like, but if you let them draw it, then you know for sure
Yeah.
that you're not, they either don't, you're not gonna like it, or
Yeah.
you do like it, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It'll either, it'll
Couldn't hear.
confirm your
So we'll
belief
send it
or
tomorrow, you know.
So,
question whether or not you.
so getting back to
other things that
change,
everyone knows they're gonna hate.
can I toss out a few
I can-
questions,
Yeah.
and we can respond to the questions? I'm gonna just do some what ifs, and they're gonna be goofy, but just to start the conversation. What if I'm talking about 30, 40, 50 years from now, okay? You know, and maybe your children are here and you care about what they experience. What if, off in the future, each frontage along Bay Road had asphalt to the curbing, signage, a building setback, and was basically like a strip mall. Like, take Cumberland Farms and just wash, rinse, repeat, and run it all up and down Bay Road, okay? How would that feel to you? Let's just go around the room. Does that feel good or feel bad?
Bad.
No, this is, I mean, this is.
This sounds stupid,
It
but
is
just play
stupid.
with me first.
Like
Play,
this, I put
play
that
with,
little
play for
thing
just a
to get to
second.
an end result.
Unbelievably
It's-
bad.
Play
nobody's
for,
interested in
great,
asking,
beautiful,
Like pointed questions.
beautiful,
It's like-
okay, beautiful.
What does a school that's, you know, got the highest
Yeah.
technology and the best teachers and program in the,
Okay.
what does that look like? You know what I mean? It's
Okay,
kinda like,
so, but can we,
one of
so,
those an ice cream shop.
so can we agree that there's nobody in the room who would embrace that vision? Can we agree with that? Okay. Your current zoning does not prevent that. Your current zoning does not prevent that. The outcome of that in the next 50 years will be only as good as the skills and vision that are in the review process for site plan review or special permit. Does everybody agree with those statements so far?
Yes.
Good?
Yeah.
Check. We just rocketed ahead. We just rocketed ahead. Great, okay. So,
Would it jumpstart this if we just ask if everybody sees value in form-based code?
Yeah,
That
that's a good,
understands that, right?
yeah, okay.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
but we'll start with what I just said.
well,
And that's
ahead.
the-
I would answer that in a different way.
Okay.
But, you know, about form-based code, and this goes to your question, why do it?
Yeah.
The thing is, if you want your town to stay exactly the same, use a form-based code to codify it. Otherwise, it will. Because, as Jonathan was just saying, current codes, conventional codes, are blind to character, they're blind to design, they're
Blind to
a
parking
lot of
position.
things. They
curb
say,
cuts.
all you have to do, you gotta be a minimum 25 feet away from the property line. Setbacks have to be, you can maybe do 35 feet in height. And the uses, let's talk about, give you a list of uses that you can use in that building. That's really all the control you have. And it's just,
Let me take it one step further, and this is right to form-based code, right to form-based code. How about, and I can name some towns that are like this, how about you go into one of those frontages, you know, it's a 50-foot curb cut, you drive in, you do your business, and right next door is a dry cleaner, and you'd like to go there. But guess what? Between the parking lot of the ice cream shop and the dry cleaner is a chain link fence separating the parking, and the asphalt touches each other, right? And there's a chain link fence between the two pieces of asphalt. So you get back in your car, make a right turn, make another right turn, get out of your car, drop off your dry cleaning. How does that feel to you?
I'm sorry, I thought, my intent was to say, can we assume that everybody here
Yes.
understands what form-based code is,
Yes,
understands it, and
It
sees the
prevents
value?
that.
We don't have to go through the scenarios, I don't think.
okay, it
We
prevents
don't see the
that.
value.
It's ridiculous.
So,
Yeah.
okay,
I think what we're
Okay.
talking about is assuming that we know what the people 40 years, 50 years
Yeah.
from now want in the town, or would we rather have them elect a planning board to make decisions about zoning and special permits and projects, similar to the people 50 years ago did with, you know what I mean? Like, we can't assume,
No.
I'm not
that's-
gonna stand up and say that the town 50 years ago, I'm not gonna protect the town for becoming something 50 years
Yeah.
from now, not knowing
Well, that's,
what the people who live in that time are gonna want.
well, that's really the
Or elect a
definition.
process that's
That's your,
democracy and
that-
what we've set up in town already to control it.
that's really the definition of smart growth, that you want people 20 years down the road to have the same choices you have today. That really is kind of the goal of sustainability and smart growth. It is.
Goal of sustainability, to have people
Yeah.
20 years from now have the same goals as us.
Not the same goals, they have the same options in making decisions about their town. In other words, you're planning for change.
I think the example of a
But-
building burning down in the center of town and what that new developer has the right to build is a better example. Let's not
Let's
look at the
do-
future way down the road.
So do that. Okay, tomorrow.
Yep.
Or Welch and Lamson, I think, is coming up for sale,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Okay. So I hear lots of people complaining about the Willow Street building that has like a block on the face of it and then a gable end. I don't know what the address or the function of that, but I hear lots of people talk about the height and the ugliness of it. Anyway, so building burns down or a building comes up for sale. Right now, again, the outcome of that is dependent just on special permit or site plan review. And there's no particular vision around that. And what's challenging to sort of look forward at, and the reason I started with the example of if everything was done without any vision, and so you had like an endless curb cut, is that happens slowly and incrementally. Can I just tell a very brief story that is in actuality and pretty sad? Denison Street in Gloucester, big subdivision, beautiful wooded area, ledgy, picturesque properties. And what folks did is they gradually subdivided the properties, and each person got their little parcel, and they clear cut to their property line. They're still in the woods, built their house, and then a couple houses down, somebody did the same thing, same thing, same thing, same thing. When you fill in all the checkerboards, guess what you have? You have 100% clear-cut, subdivided properties with buildings right on top of each other. And then nobody liked it anymore. Now what they bought into is gone. And it was incremental. It happened over 15 years. Okay, so that's another piece to it beyond just a building burns down. Do you want to control what goes back in that space? So the incremental piece does matter if you care. If you don't care, if you didn't care that incredible tract of land got clear cut and now has horrible stormwater management problems, just like Bridge Street does, if you don't care about that, then don't plan for it. And that's a discussion. That's a discussion that we could have. If you don't care about that, you could, Pat, you could say,
I think I fully understand it,
Yeah.
and I think that,
so you could say, I don't want to plan for that. Great, that's your stance.
Yeah, no, I see value in form-based code. Personally, I do.
Yep.
I think that there's a lot of people who have families and they may not care as much right now, or they may see more important things we could spend our time on in town.
Sure.
But I see value in having some sort of construct of what our town can look like, so a developer just can't rip into it.
Or even to preserve it, for it not to change. Form-based code does that.
And I don't want to jump your process here a whole lot, but I think the concern is not form-based code. The concern is does it have any teeth? And I hate to bring it up, 3A is the issue. 3A
Right.
is the issue.
Okay, so
Does
then,
form-based code have any teeth to 3A? You can put, however, if you put just 20% down here of Hamilton and Wenham within a half a mile of that train station, and you make it look as beautiful as you can, it's still a monstrosity.
so exactly, but we're off the subject of the building block. Let's go back to the building block for just a second. So, the question is, does the planning board adopt the position that we don't want anything to change, leave it the way it is, therefore leave the conventional zoning? Forget 3A for just a second, just this one building block. Okay, so we could sort of, go around the room and say, would you rather leave the conventional, Euclidean zoning in place, or do you think form-based code has value?
I wouldn't say leave it. I would say, I wonder if we can achieve the same outcome or similar goals in changing the existing zoning.
No,
Recommend
The
changes.
existing zoning isn't set up to do that.
the thing about
Well,
form-based
Because like
code,
we did with the stormwater, there's an existing bylaw, we
Yeah.
found a gap.
Yeah.
And we plugged that gap with the revised bylaw, and
This
I
is-
wonder if we can achieve
The
similar
form-based
outcome.
code is about relationships. Special permitting and site plan review addresses individual properties and what
Right.
people can do.
Yeah.
And the form-based code is a construct so that when development occurs, it's in relation to something else. Am I correct?
Yeah, yep.
So over time, those relationships can translate into a more walkable town, one where people can ride bikes. There might be, I think in some of the designs I saw, there was a green space, a corridor. And so over time, the buildings relate to one another in the street and the public spaces in better ways. And that can't be done if you just consider property by property, lot by lot.
But you're still building it out property by property, lot by lot,
Oh, yeah,
over
but it's
20,
not-
40, 50 years, and maybe never. But at
Yeah,
least there's
so
a vision. At least
One of
there's
the
a,
misconceptions with the public, I think, is they see, oh, this is what the town could look like. Oh, the change is gonna happen next year. No, it's not.
so that's
It's just
another
putting-
building block. Another building block is if you change the zoning, and if, building block 2 is if you change the zoning, will it happen overnight? And building block 3 is if you have 3A, will it happen overnight? Those are great discussions, but those are separate discussions. And we'll have those as part of the workshop.
So here's a rhetorical question, I think, that kind of goes off what Jeff was saying a minute ago. Because I think I agree with Pat and Jeff in terms of, I have young kids, I care about schools, parks, those kind of things. I guess my question, how I'm looking at it, is how does the form-based code hurt us? And so, why can't, that's kind of how I'm approaching it. So if we divorce it from 3A and some of the scary stuff that we all don't want to talk about, is what's the harm to the town? And I fully support the form-based code, and I see very little harm to the town in
Right.
preserving
Yeah.
the town and making it how we want it to be.
the only harm is that you have to do the work up front,
Right.
which is the real thing we're struggling with here, getting people involved to participate. What form-based codes do is flip the process around. It says, instead of putting a property up for sale with minimal zoning regulations,
Right.
allow somebody to come in and do something that's profitable for them, and then you go through a special permit at the end. Do you like it, Hamilton? Do you like this project or not? So this board spends a lot of time going through, well, this is not the way we think it ought to be done because it doesn't fit the character of the town, it doesn't, whatever. And there's a lot of money spent, and it's all wasted, frankly, for everybody, the town, the developer, and so forth. This was really prompted 20 years ago by folks who work in codes all the time, and they found out that why do people like to go and visit one type of place, and yet we build something very different in our hometowns? I think we as a community can agree roughly the feel of the town. That's one thing that I found in this town. People react to character of the town. They want to protect that. That's the one survey I would really rely on, and it's important to everybody. And so you ask yourself the question, if we know what it is what we want, why don't we get it? It's because the codes don't allow it, and then sometimes they'll prevent you getting what you want because you can't recreate places you really want. What the form-based code does is flip the process, and it says to the community, you get together and you talk about what it is you want. What's your perfect ideal downtown? And you talk about it, and you come up with a list, and then you work with an urban planner or whatever to come up with all of those ideas, sort through them to determine which ones are doable, which are realistic, and then you write a code to guarantee, as close as you can, that this is going to be the product in the end when a piece of property becomes available in the future, whether it's 20 years, 30 years down the road, or when there's a major reinvestment. In the meantime, everything is protected because of it's grandfathered in, and nobody is obliged to make any changes. That's a key thing, because now the power The power goes to the people who choose to participate in it, and why it's really difficult going through this because of all the resistance, when in fact, this is just a tool that you can use to do whatever. If you wanted to create the worst town in the country, use a form-based code, because it'll give you that. If you want to make the best community you can, use a form-based code, because it'll work for you. And developers like it because it gives them certainty. So they'll be attracted to build in the town. And then for the town's position is, if they're gonna build what you want, if a developer looks at your form-based code and you say you want this or that in a particular area to look like something that is in character with your town, if a developer's gonna do it, then you wanna make it as simple as possible to allow him to do that. So you give him as of right if he follows the code that you've drafted. So it seems like a process where everybody really can win, but it does involve participation of people at the outset and ideas that need to come out. So that's part of it. And the other thing is that if you look at, as I just read briefly, the 9 parts of the code, all of that matters, because if character, let's take that again as an example. If character is important to you, what they determined was that, and I can see this, in my experiences working, but what defines character? How would you, if you wanted to sort of replicate it in some way, what are the key factors you deal with? What are the tools in that toolkit that are gonna get you? And this is what UTILA has been going through, this long analysis of setbacks, building sizes, locations, relationship of buildings, relationship to the public realm, which are sidewalks and streets and trees. This whole complex of things that are interrelated. And it's the totality of that that gives you the character. And that's why they spend the time doing it. It seems tedious, but those are the things that are being documented, so that in creating a code, they're going to put those factors in to say that, yes, this is really what we're trying to achieve in terms of maintaining the character. So it's a protective measure for the community, so you're not gonna get unwanted things like what happened on Willow Street. And you're going to put yourself in a good position, and it is relatively easy to change. If you find after a couple of years it's not working for you, you can change it. It's not that difficult to do to fit a different scenario. So it really, what I like about it puts people in the driver's seat. The people who live there, they're in control, and in the end, when you go through the coding process, you've got some certainty about what that lot is gonna look like when that building burns down. You have a pretty good sense, because you decided early on, this is the character that you wanna see in those locations.
So what I would temper one of Emil's comments with, or elaborate, is developers like it. Well, that doesn't mean there's a floodgate of developers coming in.
No.
So, in fact, the flip side of that is it creates really clear guardrails for developers. So let's say a developer's model is clear cut, big curb cut, parking out front, big signs, and they know they can get all of that in their site plan review or their special permit. Well, as soon as the developer reads the form-based code and sees, the parking has to be beside or behind the building, and you have to limit the curb cuts. And even if it's a gas station, the gas pumps have to be beside or behind the building. Well, that's going to dissuade that developer to go to another town, and the right developer to come to the town to do something that's in character with Hamilton. So it's not that just the developers like it. It puts guardrails on the developers. So it's very clear what you'll accept and what you won't accept visually. It's not a secret in abstract words.
I think a couple questions we could pose in our roundtable, which seems like we're having kind of right now, but would be, does the board agree that we should limit the scope to the downtown district? And does the board agree to remove 3A from the analysis?
So you want to jump to 3A? So
No, I don't want to jump there.
Oh,
I think
okay.
those are like two questions that are
yeah.
super hot to address. Like,
Well-
people in the residential areas are like, you're going to tell me how to design my porch, or like I think limiting it to the downtown district puts every benefit that we've been talking about and describing has been in the downtown.
Well, the form-based code is limited to the downtown district. What's not clear right now is the relationship of the form-based code and 3A in the very downtown, not the half-mile radius, but in the downtown district. That's what's not clear right now. In other words, that overlapping Venn diagram that Deb Safford keeps asking about, that answer hasn't been made
That's
clear
like the
yet.
double whammy, is that not only is 3A something that people react to, it's also requiring the scope of the thing to leach into residential areas, which people don't want.
Yes, and that needs to be,
anyone
and that needs to be looked at and analyzed. There needs to be something specific to be able to react to and analyze rather than a Venn diagram. It needs to be way more than a Venn diagram.
maybe one of those option outcome, you were talking about buckets when we began this process a long time ago. One of those things is, what is it, forget about even talking about 3A, but what does the process look like if we restrict the form-based code to what we consider to be downtown zoning?
Well, that's where form-based code is, but what's not clear, what's gray right
Well, there
now
are
is,
two remote sites. Is that what you're talking about, the Gordon Conwell site? And
yeah, but form-based code isn't out there.
form-based code isn't. I think they're gonna use conventional coding on that, because it's simply residential
Yeah,
projects.
Does that answer that question?
yes.
Great.
That part.
Okay, so that's a really easy question to answer. That's the easy one. The harder one is when 3A comes into not the half-mile radius, but the downtown district boundary. What does that mean?
Right, and
Because in their form-based code conversations, the first workshop I was at, it was not clear. They were talking about access from residential, they were talking about the look and feel of the residential areas.
Mhm.
They weren't talking about, they were talking about applying a form-based code to residential areas,
I think that,
outside of
Outside the downtown
downtown
district.
district, not
Yes,
because of
that's not-
3A, but because of the look and feel aspect of,
I
what
think
it
on
seems like
the
when you drive.
residential side of Willow Street.
Yeah, just, they're looking at,
Might be the only place they
It's
were.
a-
no, they
Yeah.
were talking
Just
about,
along Willow
they were
so
talking about
maybe they did, but that's not on,
downtown residential.
that's not on the-
and down- and the,
it's not on the agenda.
Okay.
So,
That's fine.
so that's an easy question to answer. Again, a thornier one is that Venn diagram.
Right, and I will just make this comment, because I've listened to the oral argument that was conducted by the Supreme Judicial Court, and there's so much uncertainty about 3A. I mean, as to attempt to plan now until there's a decision from the Supreme Judicial Court, I think is extremely difficult, because we simply don't know which way they will go. And the justices were very much concerned with the guidelines,
Yeah.
and whether or not the guidelines were in fact regulations,
Right.
but were not adopted pursuant to the Administrative Procedures Act. Now, I'm not going to predict which way they would rule, but I think when we speak about 3A, we should be careful, because there's the statute 3A, and there are the guidelines. And I think most people, if you were to ask them, have less resistance to the actual statutory language than they do to the guidelines. And I can tell you that one of the justices was unequivocal, and he said that towns cannot vote to reject statutory mandates. And that's true. And there was a case that was discussed where the legislature had enacted a requirement that towns take certain steps with respect to their drinking water. This was during World War II.
Yeah.
And a town said, no, we want to do that. And the Supreme Judicial Court said, you absolutely have to do that. You cannot vote to violate a state law. But that said,
what this is though.
well, Section 3A is a state law.
It's not statutory,
Yes, it is.
the-
It's Mass General Law,
but the
Chapter
guidelines.
40A, Section
refer to.
3A. Oh, the guidelines are not law.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm making.
Right.
That's the point I'm making. So until we know, we could still adopt a 3A district, and probably no one would have a problem with it, because it wouldn't have that level of density that's set forth in the guidelines.
Isn't it the guidelines that reduces the density in the half-mile radius?
Well, they,
If we don't have the guidelines, we gotta put the entire 736 down
no,
here.
but it's the guidelines that say 731.
Okay,
The statute doesn't have anything
Okay.
like that in it. It says that each town shall adopt a zoning district within a half a mile of the MBTA station that provides as of right, development for multifamily housing at a density of 15 units per
Yeah,
acre.
of
But-
reasonable size.
Of reasonable size,
That's-
actually,
that's
but
the
it's,
other,
it's
yeah.
the it's, there's no provision for these remote sites. But it doesn't say how many units, anything like that. It doesn't say the acreage, it says reasonable size. And so it's the guidelines that trigger the fear, because they have set forth the number of units and the number of acres.
And the guidelines keep changing.
And they change.
The
All
current
the time.
zoning doesn't stop some developer from proposing a project for multifamily use in any downtown district, does it?
Right, so it sort of segues into another interesting building block, which is you could start off with a sort of a little survey on the planning board of, even if the guidelines change or get more relaxed or adjust, if you're a betting person, do you think that 3A will vanish from the face of the earth? You know, so you could go around the room and say, do you think that'll vanish, or there'll be such an uprising that they'll just repeal the law? And you could have an opinion.
I can tell you that the first statement made by the attorney for the Attorney General was that it's undisputed that the statute itself is not at issue.
Great, okay, so then,
So
so then there's, they could have their opinion, but there's your legal
Well,
opinion.
it's-
So, great,
It's not an
Perfect.
issue.
Perfect.
mean,
Perfect.
the Supreme
So
Judicial
then,
Court is not deciding the constitutionality
next-
of 3A.
the next building block would be if some form of 3A were to stay, which it's most likely,
Mostly.
some form, which do you think is a better protection to go back to the first building block? No change, no change. Which is a better protection? Conventional zoning or form-based code?
Form-based code written before the guidelines are in place or after the?
Just form-based code that you can change at will. You can
Yeah,
change at
yeah,
will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
you can change.
which would be a better protection in your opinion? Form-based code or, what's
Right
that?
now, the
Obviously.
current
Great,
zoning,
building block.
because-
So who's taking notes on the building
I would
blocks?
say right now, the current zoning, because it requires a special permit.
Okay, so we've got some awesome building blocks already, right? So,
But the special permit, remember, it's tricky. There was how long was our decision in 133 Essex?
Yeah.
so anyway, but that set a record. So, I don't know if you want to continue with this, but you can start to see how the conversation can go, and you can figure out where we have a whole bunch of things we're aligned on, unless I'm mistaken.
No, I think so, and let's,
And what'd be awesome is to start the workshop with the guiding principles and core values and see if we like them, hate them, want to rewrite our own.
okay, here's my suggestion. Since you facilitated the workshop, can I charge you with facilitating our discussion?
Sure.
You've had
If,
practice.
yeah, sure.
Does anyone object to Jonathan's acting as a facilitator here since? And so if you help us, we can put that on the agenda for our next meeting.
Yeah, so the question is, do we want to have any special meetings to accelerate this process? Do
Well-
people have the appetite for that? Is it important enough to you? Is it critical enough to the town? And how do you feel about that?
Yeah, because everything's shifting to the planning board now, not the advisory committee. So I
Right.
think that's.
The spotlight's going to be on us very
spotlight's
quickly.
gonna be here.
So, Patrick, refresh my recollection. We can notice out a workshop, right? But it's
Yes.
a little different than a regular meeting. How does that work?
We just, we write it up as a public meeting. The planning board will assemble on such and such a date. Public is invited. It becomes basically a posting that satisfies that part of the open meeting law.
But we can gather wherever it works and,
Why can't we use the November 12th meeting to do this?
Yeah. We have the ability
We
to
have-
meet, we just have to post 48 hours ahead of
well,
time.
It's already a November 12th meeting on our agenda. There's no like project in front of us, clearly. We're developing our own priorities and agenda.
I'm just
Yeah,
floating trial balloons here to see what people want.
I mean, that'll take,
our first util meeting is not until November 26th, so
the
November.
26th, so 12th
We-
could work. yeah.
The 12th could work. We have on the 12th, homework. If everybody gets their, 13
Minutes.
pages proofread, we don't have to spend a lot of time on them.
no, I don't think we would.
What we could also do is circulate the advisory committee's version of the guiding principles and core values in advance of that
Right.
meeting, so everybody can read it, digest it, and
That'd be sweet.
and respond.
If everybody reads the minutes,
Yeah.
we won't spend any time while everybody's going.
You know we don't. 10 minutes.
I won't point
There's
fingers.
Those principles actually are in UTIL's last November,
September
the
3rd.
September 30.
Is that right?
If you look
In
at
their
page
full form.
39, 40, something
Yeah.
like that.
In unedited form.
Yeah,
Anyhow, but
but we'll send it
send
around.
it, yeah.
Yeah.
So we can spend the bulk of our next meeting on that. And so I'm gonna make this quick now, because we're gonna stop the discussion. We have on our agenda discussion regarding potential amendments to the zoning bylaw and map. That's in progress. I have, just one question. I'll go to Matt, because I know you're a municipal lawyer. We haven't seen any guidelines with respect to, accessory dwelling units, right?
Correct, I don't believe I've seen those
So
yet.
we're not gonna worry about that. With respect to the GPOD, did we wanna just change the one word? or
I
do we-
would, otherwise it's useless for
Yeah.
any cluster housing.
Okay,
It's a
so-
meaningless bylaw.
So, I mean, I can do that,
Sure,
Yeah.
and we can
One
vote
word.
on it.
Yes.
One word. And then, we did the inclusionary housing bylaw, that's at, Robin Stein has that. So we're in good shape with respect to, the other potential amendments to the zoning bylaw. And once we get our, errata sheets together, then we can, have Patrick, take them and, together with, Rich Maloney's work product, we have something for the annual town meeting. So now, we can turn to, the remainder of board business, which is the approval of the minutes from September 17th, 2024. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any discussion? Any? Very good.
Yep.
The minutes are approved. They can be posted tomorrow. Any other board business? Patrick, do you have anything for us? Does anyone else have any
I
questions?
do not.
Are we going to vote on these minutes?
Oh, that would be a good idea.
You're gonna vote it as a block, maybe, or-
I'm trying to get
No,
us out
the
of
minutes we
here
just
by
talked about.
9.
I mean, all of them as
Oh.
one vote on all of them.
No, just the ones we
No, the
just,
17th is for tonight.
Just the 17th.
Oh, okay.
Next week.
Next week we'll do a
We
block.
can do a block. This is the approval of the minutes. Pat Norton,
Pat Norton, aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Darcy Dale,
Darcy Dale, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. So anything else for tonight?
I don't know, is Patrick gonna have a party? Is it gonna be a party?
Ah,
Every day is a party.
good answer.
Okay, there's only one thing left to do.
Oh, I make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Pat Norton,
Pat Norton, aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Darcy Dale,
Darcy Dale, aye.
Marnie Crouch, aye.